观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎您来到海外书场古书杨说，我是分雨禾。那么今天呢，我们向大家介绍一位在明尼苏达州非常有名的作家，他的名字叫 Lee Hanshaw Jr.那么Lee Hanshaw Jr. 他在12岁的时候就开始了他的写作生涯，从此呢再也没有放下过笔。那么1965年高中毕业以后呢，他获得了英语和历史的本科学位，随后他又获得了创意写作的研究生学位。他在高中和大学教过英语和历史，在北密吉州立大学推广部教授创作性写作。他是一个教授。他这个作品中的许多诗歌呀、短篇小说呀、长篇小说呀、散文，都是他在这个越南中部高原度过的这个时光为基础的。他的作品最早发表是1972年，多年以来，他的作品出现过众多的选集当中。他的这个史诗历史小说系列《帆船大师》The Sailing Master》2015年出版的第一册，2017年出版的第二册《长途跋涉》，2019年出版的第3本就是马奎尔的信，均获得明尼苏达州图书奖和中西部独立出版商协会奖提名。他住在明尼阿布利斯，明尼苏达。那么今天呢，我们把他请到了，本来是可以把他请到我们这个演播室现场的，可是因为这个新冠疫情的原因呢，我们只能在 Zoom 上来采访这位作家，看看他能给我们一些什么样的启迪，好吗？我们现在就要接通他的线。Lee Hanshaw Jr. began his writing life when he was 12 years old and has never put down his pens. After graduating from high school in 1965, he earned an undergraduate degree in English and history. He then went on to graduate degree in creative writing. He has taught English and history in high school and college. Creative writing in Extension Division of Bemidji State University. The author has the program and in community education. For over 20 years, he worked as graphic artist and newspaper, where he also wrote a weekly column. Lee is a Vietnam veteran. Many of his poems, short stories, novels, and essays are based on his time spent in the central highland of Vietnam. His work was first published in 1972 and throughout the years has appeared in numerous anthologies, all the way from Beijing to Copenhagen. His epic historical fiction series, The Sailing Master, Book 1, Come of Age, published in 2015. Book 2, The Long Passage, published in 2017. And Book 3, Letter of Marque, published in 2019, have been nominated for Minnesota Book Award, as well as Midwest Independent Publishers Association Award. He lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Today we're going to interview him in Zoom because during the coronavirus, he usually not go out, meet anyone else. So we have opportunity today to meet him in Zoom, see what he can tell us about being a successful writer and what we should learn from him. All right, now we're going to connect him and see what he can say. Mr. Lee Hanshaw Jr. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, my Chi. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. And we have a long time no see you. And I'm
Yes,
glad
that's
we
right.
can see each other in Zoom.
Yeah.
So during this coronavirus time, how you life look like? It changed too much or not too much for you?
Well, it hasn't changed for me too much. It's changing all around me. But like I was saying to you earlier, my life is read, ride,
Read,
write,
write,
repeat.
write, repeat.
Yeah. So that does not include a lot of social interaction. I still see people, but at a 6 feet or more distance. And I do miss being closer to my friends, but that's just what we have right now. But I think we're going to be moving through it.
How did you become a writer?
Well, the first time my writing life began when I was 12 years old. I did not immediately become a writer, but I was inspired to write at that early age because I read a novel by C.S. Forester, the Horatio Hornblower series, and I fell in love with the sea story, and I really liked the main character, Horatio Hornblower, and a little voice in my head said, well, why don't you try to write a story that Horatio Hornblower would like to read? And so I did at 12 years old.
Wow.
I never finished the story. I don't have the story now, but I remember starting the story. And later on in our interview, I will come back to that. And after I was 12, I had to go through adolescence and all that, so I didn't write too much, but I picked it up again when I went to college. And when I turned about 30 or so, a voice inside of me said again, call yourself a writer. You are a writer. When somebody asks what you do or who you are, tell them you are a writer. And so I am a writer.
Your other authors, have you had most influence on how you write?
Well, I mentioned Horatio Hornblower series, C.S. Forester, but I do not write like him. I write more like some people that aren't quite so well known. William Kotzwinkle. Some of your viewers might know him, maybe not. Kurt Vonnegut. I love Kurt Vonnegut. He just goes right to the story and keeps going with the story. And the poets that I like are Ursula Le Guin. She's a novelist, but also she writes poetry. And I love her poetry and I love her stories. And so those are some names that people may recognize or not, but the truth is I read everything, and some of it I like and some of it I don't like, but it all has an influence on me because I hear the words and I wonder, well, why did that person write that way and why do I like it or not? So I'm always being influenced. Those are my early influences, but I may read someone tomorrow that may influence me more. And those are the 3 books that I have recently published. Book 1 is of the Sailing Master is called Coming of Age. Book 2 is called The Long Passage. And book 3 is called Letter of Marque. They are all published separately, but they all kind of one right after another. You can read 1 and then 2 and then 3 and you will follow the story. The reason that I wrote The Sailing Master comes back to what I was saying earlier on. I fell in love with a sea story when I was 12 years old, and 8 years ago I came back to it with this trilogy, because it is set on a sailing ship in the same age as Horatio Hornblower was sailing. That time period is 1798, and the story goes on from there. And the reason that I chose that time period is because that time period is called the Age of Revolution, because we had the American Revolution in 1776. We had the French Revolution in 1789. All along, the Industrial Revolution is happening. The Enlightenment, which is an intellectual revolution, is taking place at this time. The sea is opening up because the people were beginning to navigate better. They could find their way over the ocean. And all of these elements are coming together pretty much at the same time in the life of my main character, whose name is Owen Harriet. And Owen Harriet, the book one begins when he is 12 years old, and he has had a family tragedy. His mother has died giving birth to his her fourth child, and his mother was a weaver, and she brought in money for their family. His father was a farrier. That's a person who works on horses. Excuse me. But they became financially destitute. And Owen's uncle, his mother's brother, was a captain of a sailing frigate, HMS Eleanor. He takes Owen Harriet under his wing, so to speak, and says, I will take you to sea. You will be my cabin boy to relieve your father and your brothers of their financial burden. And that's basically where the story begins. And the subtitle of this whole series is called Courage and Desire in the Age of Revolution. And that's what the story is about. The story is about the courage and the desire that our young main character, Owen Harriet, has all the way through the stories. So that's basically what I've been writing lately for the last 5 or 6 years, the 3 books, and I'm writing book 4 now too, and hope to be done with it by the end of the year.
So for you, what's the most important in your story?
The most important element in my opinion, is your main character. You have to have a character that you believe, that you know, that speaks to you. It's hard for me to describe what I mean by speaks to you, but an example is, if I'm writing a sentence that Owen Harriet is saying, if something in my mind says, no, Owen Harriet would not say that, then I don't write that, because I know that character well enough. And what I have learned through the years as a writer is, if you have a strong character that you can believe in, excuse me, then your readers will believe it too. They might not like the character, but they will believe the character. They will believe what that person does. Oh yes, that's what this person would do. Or I'm surprised, but yes, that would happen. If you have a character like that, you can write any kind of story that you want to write. It does not have to be a sea story. It does not have to be set in the past. It can be set in the future. It can be right now. But if you have a main character who is believable, not necessarily liked, but at least believable, you can write anything. and the other characters that follow that character, they will become believable too. And the way you do that, at least for me, is you have to observe what's going on around you in your world. Listen to what people are saying. Watch what they're doing. How are they interacting with each other? How are they reacting to things that are happening to them? What are their facial expressions? How are they moving their hands? And you have to, for me, and I think most writers and all artists really, you have to observe. You have to observe your world. And to observe your world, you have to be in it.
How has writing affected your life?
Well, that's a long one. And I will start by saying something toward the end of my statement is, in 2 times, writing has saved my life.
Okay.
The first time was when I was of college age. We're talking about 1968 or so. The Vietnam War was raging, and young American men were being drafted against their will to go fight in Southeast Asia. Maybe they wanted to, maybe they didn't, but they had no choice. They were being drafted. Unless they could have some kind of deferment. The kind of deferment that I had was called a student deferment, because I was in college. And the reason that I was in college was because I knew how to write. And so my writing ability kept me in college and kept me from being drafted. I could keep my deferment. But here's the thing, my G, I was doing very well in college. I was going to graduate. And guess what? The war was still going. And so I knew that if I graduated from college, I was going to get drafted anyway. So I quit college when I had 3 months left of school. And I lost my deferment, and I was drafted, and I was sent to Vietnam anyway. But by that time, the most ferocious part of the fighting, it was all ferocious, but by the time I got there, it was starting to slow down a little bit. Less people were being involved in the fighting. And so I was able to stay away from it for a little while. And that's because I knew how to write. And so it kept me in school. That's one way it saved my life, I think. The other way that it saved my life was I never really had a big problem drinking, but I haven't had anything to drink for 15 years. And even before that, I realized, okay, Lee, if you drink, you cannot write. And if you can't, and if you want to write, then you better not drink. So what is your choice? What do you want to do more, drink or write?
Right.
And so I chose to write. And I think that it is, maybe it didn't save my life, but it has certainly improved my life. And it certainly has given me a lot more money in my billfold, because I don't buy alcohol anymore.
If people want to be right, do you think that something can...
Okay, well, I think that for one thing, you do have to have talent. And talent is something given to us. It's a gift. We do not go out and buy talent. We do not beg for it. It's a gift from our Creator. And we all have talents. Some of us have writing talent, some of us musical talent, some of us mathematical talent. It's all something that is a gift to us. And we have to learn, first we have to recognize it, and then we have to make some decisions. And once you make a decision, let's say as a writer, then you can make some other choices. When I was young, 20 years old and starting to be a writer, I did not want to be influenced by anybody. I did not want anybody to tell me how to write, or say you have to go out and make friends with a publisher or an agent. I said, no. If they cannot appreciate my writing as what it is without having to be friends with them or having some kind of an agreement with them, then that's not for me. And so I was on my own for many, many years, even though people told me, listen, if you want to have success as a writer or anything, you have to have a network of people that you can talk to, who know about you, who can say things, good things about you to other people, and pass along that information around so that your name gets out there. Because if you rely on just yourself, well, it's probably not going to happen. And so, but for many years, I told myself, no, if I'm good enough, I'm good enough. And if I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And one other thing about that, probably 25 or 30 years ago, I was listening to this woman, a writer, and she was successful, and she was speaking to a group of people, and I was in that audience. And she said, if you are good, don't worry about getting published, because quality rises to the top, and they will find you. Quality rises to the top. If you're a good writer, sooner or later, somebody will recognize it and they will publish you.
But if you're not published, who can find you?
Well, you know, that's why that's kind of contradictory to what I was just talking about before. But for me, when she said that, and I remember her saying that, it inspired me to keep on writing, because if I hoped I was good enough, and I tried to keep getting better and better, and hopefully when opportunity knocks, you open the door, so to speak.
Oh, I know. I got you now. It's like a Gogh painting. 100 years later, they found him.
Yeah.
So like me, I don't go to school too much. You know, when I come to America, I don't speak English in that time. But I do like a writer, like when I'm very young. Also, I learn in the hard way, but I never put down my pen. I have my first book published. So for a young writer like me, just start out, what you can tell me?
Well, there are a lot of things I could tell you, but the things that work for me is you have to try to write your best. Yeah, whenever you sit down and write, whenever I sit down and write, I am trying to write that word, that sentence, that paragraph, that sequence as good as I can write at that point in time. It might not be the greatest, but it's as good as I can do at that point in time. So always give it your best shot.
Okay, remember.
Yeah, always try to focus on doing as good as you can at that particular time. Okay. Another thing, before you, I think you're getting to a point in your age where you can use this because you're young, but you're not that young.
I'm 44.
Yeah, you've been around. So recognize when something is, when you can finish a story before you even start it. Because a lot of people, especially young people, they write a story, they start a story, they get halfway through it or whatever, and then they drop it.
Yeah.
And then they go on to something else.
That's very, big thing.
They go on to another story. And so they end up having a lot of half-finished stories.
Oh.
And they have not gotten they have not learned how to finish a story. And how to finish the story, finishing the story is the hardest thing to do. I've written many stories, finished lots of them, and I'm never quite 100% satisfied with any ending. I'm getting close, but still, there's always something that I can do better. But it has helped me a lot in my own writing to recognize that if I have a story idea, I can usually tell myself, no, you don't know how to finish this, or you can't finish it. So don't even write it. Go on to something else. Another way to, an analogy, another way of looking at it is, it's called don't chase the rabbit. A dog is always, don't chase the rabbit. A dog is out hunting rabbits, and it sees a rabbit and it chases it, and the rabbit runs away, and they never catch that rabbit. And they see another rabbit and they chase that, and they just keep chasing the rabbit and never catching the rabbit.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so you have to recognize what rabbits can I catch. So that's one thing. Yeah, and another thing, and you are doing that. There are organizations or groups of people you're having trouble with in writing. You can use terms in writing that you just can't use on the street. You can't say to somebody in a coffee shop, well, I don't want to use a subjunctive mode or whatever, or I don't want to, this sentence is too passive. People are going to look at you like, are you nuts? But if you're in a group of people who are like-minded, you can use that vocabulary and you can understand what it is that they are doing. And you might have problems with writing a certain scene or something. They might be able to help you with it, or they might say, don't chase rabbits, So there are lots of organizations, and just not even organizations, but just groups of people who aren't even organized that you can talk to and associate with. One of them, and this is where you and I met, is Minneapolis Writers Workshop.
Yes.
And they have been around. I think you might know this, but people might be interested. The Minneapolis Writers Workshop was established in 1937.
Yeah, that's almost 100 years.
Yeah, 1937. And the way it came about was, for people who know history a little bit, that was right in the middle of the World Depression. And writers and everyone else, they did not have jobs. And so our president at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, established what was called the Works Progress Administration. And the Writers Workshop was part of that organization.
Yep.
And nobody at that time, back in 1937, said, hey, this organization is going to be around until 2020 and longer. But it is. And it's because it satisfies a need. And there are lots of other groups that do the same thing. But writing is, even though writing is solitary, you sit at your desk, you kind of tune out everything so that you can concentrate on just where the rabbit is and all of that. But still, there's a social connection that is very helpful to most writers. So I would suggest that if you, for a young writer, try to get to know other writers, and that might be helpful, and share your work with them too.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful. I will remember all of this. And
okay.
Last question. I don't know how long we have. So what are you writing now, and what comes next?
Well, I'm writing book 4 of the Sailing Master. The title is called Saint Helena. Saint Helena, and the time period is 1821.
1821.
So 1821. And the Napoleonic Wars are over. The age of revolution is winding down. Napoleon was exiled to the island of St. Helena. He was captured and surrendered at Waterloo in 1815, and he was sent to the island of St. Helena, which is right up there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's 1,500 miles from anywhere, and that's where they said, this is where you will stay until the end of your life. And that's where he did die in 1821, and that's where this story begins, with our main character, Owen Harriot, who is sent there on his ship to record and witness the actual death of Napoleon Bonaparte. Except, does he really die? And that's what the story is. That's where the story begins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So well, when people can see this published, maybe?
I think I'll be done writing the story by the end of this year, and I will submit it to my publisher, Shipwrecked Books. They're in southeast Minnesota. They're a local publisher. Tom Driscoll is the man's name, and he has an independent publishing house in a little town called Rushford, which is near Winona. Hopefully he will want to see it, and hopefully he will like it. He's published the first 3, and he might want this one. And then, if everything works, it'll be out next year sometime. Not early, but maybe by the middle of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, and after that, I have great plans for my main character, Owen Harriot, because St. Helena will end, but his story does not end. And he's going to end up growing up to be an old man. He's going to live to be about 75, 80 years old, which is pretty old for those days. He's going to own a bookstore, in an antiquarian bookstore in Portsmouth, England. And he has his wife from many years ago taking care of the house, and they both take care of the bookstore. And Owen has found this easy chair. It's a nice, comfortable chair that's sitting next to a nice window on the second story that he can look out over the bay. And whenever he sits in it, he has an interesting experience. It's always different. But whenever he sits in that specific chair, something happens.
Wow. Very interesting.
Well, I hope so.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Lee Hanshaw Jr. And,
Thank you, Mai Chi. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I hope the coronavirus can down very soon, so we can see each other face to face. And
yes.
Take care and keep the great work. Keep safe.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. We hope to hear you reading again pretty soon.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I will one day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.